Welcome to Every Dollar Counts with Josh and Jay, a shot of true serum for your investment and insurance questions. I'm Josh Knoll, the owner of Gulf Coast Financial Advisors, and I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Jay Stubbs, director of the Gulf Coast for First Protective. We are brought to you on the Prime Capital Investment Advisors podcast network. Jay, buddy, how you doing?
Josh, I'm doing great. It's good to be with you in studio and talking about some of these very important topics on qualified planning, specific to 401k plans, and some other aspects that agents, advisors, and clients need to know about this stuff.
Yeah, I agree. And I want to thank you for joining me today because we have a very special episode. It's dedicated specifically to 401k plan sponsors and business owners. So, Jay, I recently completed a qualified plan educational series called the 401k Project, and it featured the contributions of Matthew Eichmann. He's the National Retirement Practice Leader for Prime Capital Investment Advisors and Qualified Plan Advisors. For those of y'all that may not be familiar with those two companies, my company, Gulf Coast Financial Advisors, is part of the Prime Capital's network of independent advisors, which really gives me the support of a multi-billion-dollar investment company, but still provides for independence and ownership of my practice.
That's a great resource for you, Josh. Amazing resource, and I'm so thankful that you've got it to bring to your clientele.
To be quite honest, Jay, it allows me to compete with the big boys, because I can be local, I can be independent, I can have ownership of my book, but I have the resources, many team members at my disposal that can help me come in and really service and work with my clients to the highest level. So, Jay, Matthew and I capped off our series with a webinar where we discussed the most important items that plan sponsors need to tackle in 2020. So what I did is I selected a few important clips from that webinar that you and I are going to provide some context to. Now, listeners, I want you to note that Matthew Eichmann has experience as a risk attorney, many years of experience. So it's very detailed and very relevant information, particularly to the plan sponsors and business owners listening to our podcast. I will go even so far as to say this, Jay. As you know, I'm a lifelong basketball junkie.
That's right.
And as you also know, and many people that meet me out in public know, I'm not what you would call tall.
No, you're challenged vertically.
Challenged vertically, yeah. So anytime that I would step on the basketball court over the years, I had to kind of do a little mental exercise to tell myself, well, I belonged here. I know these guys are bigger, faster, and stronger, but I'll find a way. And I did over the years. Well, the reason I bring that up is because, stepping on the court, Matthew Eichmann in this space was kind of like stepping on the court with Michael Jordan. I mean, you're talking about the top of the top in these items. So I think the listeners, as you listen to what Matthew has to say and my feedback, you're really seeing someone that has crafted his experience and his art to the highest level. And I highly encourage you to take a listen to what he has to say.
And there's some urgency to the messaging and the content that we're about to give you all. So listen, share. Listen again and make sure that you're understanding all of the components that you're going to hear.
Yeah, these are items that plan sponsors need to tackle now, not next year or the following year. These are things that are important right now. Jay, this episode, we're going to discuss financial wellness, a term that is relatively new to qualified plan space. It's really kind of a evolution of plan health that kind of started 5-6 years ago, but it's really taken an outsized importance in our COVID world. It became obvious that many plan participants were simply just not ready for the financial impact of a global pandemic, emergency funds and access to capital. So, Jay, I know that you serve in a role with many financial advisors along the Gulf Coast like myself. How important has it been? What have you seen with financial wellness discussions for your advisors, plan participants, and in your own experience?
Well, it's important to note that financial wellness is kind of the overreaching theme of an individual or a household's complete financial plan. It's important to get everything documented and also keeping your balance sheets and knowing what's what, but it did shine a pretty bright flashlight on the fact that maybe just that savings account wasn't where it needed to be in order to sustain a not being able to work or not being able to even go into work to earn a living. So it's important. It's now more than ever the fiduciary responsibility, the advisor's role to make sure that there is a good topics of discussion, bringing clients into the know on all things financial.
Well, and I think, Jay, it also ties into an episode we did just a couple episodes ago related to the CARES Act and loan provisions. And it really ties into the fact that the CARES Act had some increased loan provisions. That's all well and good, and I'm sure in many cases it really helped. But I think that if you'd had a financial wellness program in place, you might have potentially minimized some of the impact of people having to access what is supposed to be their retirement account. So I think these tie in together, and I encourage the listeners, jump back a couple episodes and listen to our discussion on the CARES Act. So with all that said, without further ado, let's hear a clip from my discussion with Matthew Eichmann. And before we dive into all that, though, let's have our friends from Sloth Racer kick us off.
Financial wellness is perhaps most critical to your employees. The others might be somewhat compliance related, and they might be related to risk management. But my goodness, we've learned really quickly that American workers need a lot of help when it comes to their financial wellness. And really what we've experienced is that intentions were good. We had a big surprise. We're moving into this new normal, and employers are responding in a really cool and practical and forward-looking way, which is starting to reveal to us some best practices. And so we're going to hit on each of these bullet points within this fourth item. So let's back ourselves up a little bit here. We already went back and kind of relived the way in which, people got their mail in 1974 and the really cool cell phone that Josh gave his wife in the late 90s.
I think that was it, actually.
Yeah, the way in which we started to consume information differently. Well, similarly, I want to go down memory lane just a little bit when it comes to financial wellness. So being in this retirement plan world, being heavily focused on 401k plans and 403b plans, in about 2014 and 2015, employers started to talk about this new term. They started to talk about plan health. And plan health was a buzzword. And we started to understand that employers were looking at their retirement plans a little bit more closely. And they're asking themselves, how good is my participation rate? How good is the average savings rate? Maybe how diversified are our people? And plan health was the buzzword. But that really was kind of narrow, wasn't it? It relates to a retirement plan specifically, not to a broader financial situation. So then in about 2016, we started to see this bleed over of the wellness term, not from just the health and welfare side of how a company offered its benefits, but into financial wellness. And people would hear wellness, financial wellness? Oh, financial wellness. And really started to become a little bit more interesting. Employers would say, that makes some sense for us to try to provide that to our employees. And we started to see a lot of survey data in 2018 saying, we're looking at this. This is something that I think might be of interest. We need to figure out who does it and what does it really mean. But you know what? We're going to explore that. We'll do some RFIs, some RFPs, and employers got into 2019, and some had already put it into place, and others were saying, hey, we're putting it into place, and this is going to be really good, and we're going to hit the ground running in 2020. And then, oh my gosh, what just happened? Like, what the heck happened? And that threw so many companies off. It just derailed plans we had in place. So employers spend some time trying to kind of patchwork, get through the days, then eventually get through the weeks, hopefully then get through the months, get to the end of a quarter. And a lot of the aid to be able to get there was through the CARES Act. We've already talked about this. We've talked about what the CARES Act made available. But you know what the CARES Act said to me most loudly? It said that American workers were so ill-equipped to survive a short-term cash crunch that both sides of Congress, who can't work together to do anything, knew it was so important for them to be able to come together to give people access to $100,000 of their retirement plan money like that. And that happened before March was up. And so although there's very, very positive aspects to that, it helped a lot of employees, a lot of their families get through a challenging time. Maybe it avoided, the need for them to go through foreclosure and to lose a house. And if that is how it helped out those people, that's absolutely wonderful. But what we truly saw is that employees weren't ready. They weren't ready for the short-term cash crunch because not nearly enough Americans had short-term savings. And that really said to me, wow, Plan Health isn't good enough. Plan Health doesn't tell the whole story. You could all have a wonderful retirement plan with high participation rate and a high average savings rate. And do we think that when somebody was worried about having their job in April and being able to make their April mortgage payment, that they said, well, at least I have money when I'm 59 and a half. We know that that wasn't enough. So employers have responded and recognized that we're in this new normal, and employees are starting to think differently. They're starting to interact differently within a workforce or within the workplace. And we're seeing different ways in which people will desire work-life balance and the way that they're going to work more remotely. And so when we think about financial wellness, and we're going to get into some best practices, we need to recognize, first of all, how things have changed from our ability to communicate with your people. Anybody listening to us who works in HR, works in benefits, I think probably has already been through this exercise of wondering, how do we engage our people now? Now we're learning, aren't we? A lot of us are learning. Josh said that he feels like he's learned a lot through this process that we've been through together. One of the things that I've learned from working with Josh is how to use these types of technological capabilities to have a conversation like this, to be able to reach more people, to try to communicate so that we can engage. And that'll be a challenge in the wellness front. But one of the things that we continue to see is that there's going to be a lot of implications for employees, not just short term, but long term. And a lot of the focal points to this point in time have been, I'd say, kind of maybe call them practical, objective, a little concrete, less emotional. But I am getting the sense and I'm feeling the momentum from talking with HR professionals, benefits managers, and hopefully that'll trickle up to the business owners. We've got to be very aware of the stress and the anxiety and the loneliness and the depression that's going to hit people from a mental health perspective. We're going to have a very fragile country. And that's not a political statement like it might have been a year ago. That's a very, very important comment, an apolitical comment about the need to understand that our employees are going to need more from a self-confidence, from a security, from a wellness perspective than ever before. And what's interesting about that is I like to think about it first and foremost, just from the betterment of your employees' perspective. That's the starting point, right? If you're working in HR, what does HR stand for? Human resources. Your job is to show up 40, 50, 60, maybe 70 hours a week and be a resource for the humans that make your company go. However, we can also be realistic about this. We can recognize that there's a little bit of something in this for everybody. We can also recognize that when your employees are financially stressed, and that impacts them from a mental health perspective, it also impacts them from an efficiency and a productivity and a turnover perspective. And do you love going out and trying to figure out why your people aren't showing up for work? You recognize what the cost is when you have to replace an employee and then 6 months later have to replace that new employee. So we need to recognize that the cost pre-COVID-19 was already very high for organizations when employees felt stress. But one thing that we're learning is in the course of COVID-19, and as we're pulling employees and asking them what causes you the most stress, financial or money matters alone is the number one answer as often as all of the other number one answers combined. This is the number one concern for employees is their financial or money matters or the challenges that they face. And what they're looking at here is that employees are looking for more attention. They're looking for more touches. You may hear somebody talk about a low touch economy because employees are spread out. Josh and I've talked about this a little bit. We're not seeing the desire for a low touch economy. We're looking at people who are saying, I need more help. I need more service. I need more of this. It just has to be different than what it was in the past. But I need it. And I need to be engaged because if I'm engaged, I'm going to enjoy work. I'm going to stay there longer. I'm going to be more loyal and I'm going to be a better employee. So Josh, I want to work through these best practices here, but really quickly, because I know that you work closely both with business owners and HR professionals, and you help kind of oversee teams who will provide the education, kind of what have you learned or experienced about this growing need for wellness as a result of the pandemic?
Well, Matthew, let's walk through what all happened at once for a typical, generally speaking, 401k plan participant. You know, for the last 11 plus years, they've been putting money into their 401k plan. They've had some dips here and there along the way, but in general, it's been going up and up and up. Generally speaking, America had a relatively stable job environment, and people were able to commute to work and, you know, go to their office buildings and just live their life. You know, we all, there was issues then, obviously, but within a matter of days, literally hours, we had, not only did the market drop historically, we had a global pandemic come in to where, You literally can't even go to your office. You're now forced to work from home. Or worse, you're unemployed. Possibly even like a lot of people that are in the hospitality industry, your position may have disappeared overnight. So what I see from mine, and as we've navigated all this, it goes back to two things you said earlier. One, maybe, and this is debatable, but maybe the world was going towards us, maybe skewing towards maybe a low-touch human point, but I don't think so. But I can say for certainty that within a matter of days, weeks at most, we swung dramatically back towards a high-touch human touch point. And I think how that relates to my question, Matthew, is I appreciate the comment which you made earlier about technology, but quite honestly, as I've already disclosed, I'm of a certain age, and I honestly have to use my 14-year-old son to figure out a lot of tech for me, right? So think of people that are older than me. They've got their 401k plan. Their world has been upended. They're having to look at certain things. They've got options on the table they don't fully understand, and they're having to engage all this now via technology that they may or may not fully know how to use. So my question to you is, as financial wellness comes into play, this point number 2 on your screen, what's your opinion on the ability to engage via technology, particularly in a COVID-19 world?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, that really fits into these best practices. The first is to kind of put into place the technology and embrace the use of it. But that ability to engage is absolutely critical. And here's what's interesting. I actually had a client review yesterday and then another one this morning. And yesterday we used Zoom and everybody was on camera. This morning, our team was on camera, but nobody from the client was on camera. And our team was exchanging messages in our debrief about the fact that it felt entirely different. You know why? Because we didn't take the steps to be able to engage through technology. So what I would reiterate to employers, whether you're trying to communicate to your employees or when we're doing financial wellness education, whether the employee is 18 years old or 25 or 35 or 50 or 60 or 70 or 80, I don't care. We want to encourage not only to have the technology, but really, really use it. So, Josh, if you and I were on yesterday, we could have had a conversation on phone, but instead we hopped on via, like Zoom, and we can chat this way and we can communicate. That's what I think we're going to see from a wellness perspective is, hey, if somebody has Zoom, for example, get on the camera and interact. Actually try to engage. And one of the things that we've talked about with our educators is don't just use technology, become damn good with it. If you can become damn good with that technology, then you can have a pretty similar experience. And then you get to take these other 4 steps, which is customize the financial wellness education to the organization first, and then all the way so it's personalized to the employee. And that allows you to have more expansive topics, financial and otherwise, 401k plan and otherwise. And then, and this is really critical, gather the data, become results driven, interact with the employer about what the wellness needs are of that organization, and then build out the curriculum to suit it. And that's where we're going to see this next generation of financial wellness programs. They're going to meet these 6 criteria. And I know, Josh, I'm going to try to move to the next topic here in the interest of time, but I know this is something that employers can give you a call and say, hey, explain to me how that works, and you'll be able to walk them through this in greater detail.
All right, so plan sponsors and business owners, what you just heard was a discussion between Matthew Eichmann and myself related to the big items that plan sponsors need to tackle in 2020. I do believe this is a great representation of the experience and expertise that Gulf Coast Financial Advisors brings to the table, and really that's enhanced by the combination of the significant resources available to me through qualified plan advisors. So if you're a plan sponsor or business owner located along the Gulf Coast and you'd like to have a conversation about these issues, you can call us at 251-327-2124, or you can always visit my website at gulfcoastfa.com. That's FA as in financial advisor.
Josh, you've got some good material on your website that business owners and plan participants can go and look into, can't you?
I do, Jay. And specific to this topic, I actually have a dedicated landing page called the 401k Forum, where you're going to find this information, related podcast articles. It's obviously going to be very CARES Act and COVID related, but that's what should be on top of mind for plan sponsors right now. So I really encourage you all to visit that website, take time to listen to the full webinar, and dive into the other materials that we have there. And then also, lastly, to all you independent and semi-independent advisors and agents out there, hearing the value that Jay Stubbs could bring to your practice, you can always find him at jaystubbs.com. That's JAYSTUBBS.com. Jay, any final thoughts?
Josh, this webinar that you did, you and Matthew did, is fantastic content. I really enjoyed listening to it and taking a lot of notes and just soaking up all the information. A lot of change, especially in retirement planning in 2020. When you look at the CARES Act and the Secure Act and all of the details that we did in these episodes, really, really important information for people to soak up.
I think it's fair to say that 2020 will go down not only as in society as a time of unprecedented change, but you really had a lot of things come to a head as it relates to qualified plans, particularly 401k. So yes, highly encourage, I agree with you, Jay, highly encourage people, especially if you are someone that sponsors a plan or is a business owner offering a 401k or are thinking about offering a 401k plan to your employees. Take the time, take a listen. You'll be much better educated. Well, Jay, before we go, we got to do quick housekeeping for compliance.
Yes, please do.
Yep. Jay Stubbs and First Protective are not affiliated with Prime Capital Investment Advisors, Qualified Plan Advisors, or Gulf Coast Financial Advisors. And Josh Knoll and Gulf Coast Financial Advisors are not affiliated with First Protective. Jay, I want to thank many thanks to our producer, Johnny Gwynn of Deep Fried Studios. I want to thank you, obviously. And then a special thanks to Matthew Eichmann for taking the time to provide so much knowledge to my network. He really put a lot of time and effort into this, and it shows. And then finally, a huge shout out to all y'all that have joined Jay and I in this journey. To those of you all joining us now, check out our previous episodes. You're going to be pleasantly surprised. If you like the show, do me a favor. Please subscribe on the Apple Podcast app or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And while you're there, you would be doing us a huge favor if you would rate and review the show. It helps other listeners like you find us. Lastly, you like the show music? Go check out slothracerband.com. That's slothracerband.com. And they're going to take us home now. This has been Every Dollar Counts with Josh and Jay. Advisory services offered through Prime Capital Investment Advisors, LLC, PCIA, a federally registered investment advisor. PCIA, doing business as Prime Capital Wealth Management, PCWM, and Qualified Plan Advisors, QPA. Gulf Coast Financial Advisors is independent of Prime Capital Advisors. Information presented for educational purposes only, is not an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any securities. All investments involve risk, and unless otherwise stated, be sure to consult a tax professional before implementing any tax or investment strategies.